So we'll move on to our department reports. The first one comes to us from Planning and Building, and it's regarding the Code Enforcement Unit Annual Report. Director Ford.
Good morning, Chair Bass and members of the Board of Supervisors, John Ford and Karen Minnell with the Planning and Building Department to present the annual report on code enforcement. Our objective of this report is to give the board a report on some of the successes and challenges that the code enforcement unit has faced. While it's not possible to recount every single action that's happened throughout the year, there is a list of all the new complaints and actions that have come in during the 2021 calendar year, and also a report of all the cases that have been resolved. So Karen Minnell will now provide the highlights for the year.
All right, good morning, Board. My name is Karen Minnell. I'm the Code Enforcement Manager. So this report describes the activities of the Code Enforcement Unit during the 2021 calendar year. We've had some significant accomplishments and challenges, and we've made progress, and we have laid out a solid plan on how we're going to move forward. One of the accomplishments in early 2021 was the request for proposals for developing a pre-qualified list of contractors to select from to conduct county abatements. Having this pre-qualified list of contractors has greatly reduced the time involved with performing county abatements. The result of streamlining this process is evident in the number of abatements performed in 2021, which has quadrupled over the previous years. So the contracts with these companies expire in January 2023. And we will be circulating another RFQ for the next 2 years. In 2021, the county conducted 4 abatements. These were performed on cases where the property owner was unwilling or incapable of dealing with the public nuisances located on their property. This was done as a last resort and only after repeated attempts to get the property owner to perform the abatement themselves. The first was the demolition of a fire-damaged church on Elm Street in Garberville. It had become an attractive nuisance for the community, and in addition to the dangerous conditions of the building, there was a vast amount of solid waste accumulating in the property, and the community was demanding that enforcement take place. The violations on the property were abated in February. This is a second picture of the site after cleanup. The second county-led abatement involved a long-standing case on Walnut Drive in Eureka. This residence had several substandard housing violations, and the property was littered with solid waste and junk vehicles. In April, the solid waste and vehicles were removed from the property, and the residence was boarded up to prevent entry. The county recorded a lien on this property for the cost of the abatement, and the property is expected to be auctioned in May of 2022, and the county will be in a position to recover the costs associated with the county abatement. The third abatement took place in Fields Landing on 3rd Street. The property owner was making extensive renovations to the residence that rendered the structure dangerous, and the property around the residence was full of solid waste and was spilling out onto the street. This abatement was completed in July, and here's the picture of the site as it looks today. The last abatement of 2021 was a motel in Oric that had flagrant substandard housing conditions. The process for this abatement required the county to progress in several phases. First, the county issued relocation benefits to the registered tenants of the motel. Then the structures making up the motel were boarded up to prevent entry, and the solid waste littering the exterior of the motel was removed. In preparation for the demolition, there was asbestos and lead paint testing performed, and the buildings were fumigated to prevent the cockroaches, bed bugs, and rats from entering the community when the buildings will be demolished. These phases of the abatement occurred in October through early January 2022, and demolition is scheduled for later this year. This is a summary of the 4 abatements that the county led during 2021 and their associated costs. Code enforcement is following the procedures for recovery of these costs through the assessment, liens, and/or adding the recoverable costs to the property tax rolls.
Supervisor Bone, I think, has a question for you, Karen.
The $84,000 on the Cutton location, is that an accumulation of the 3 cleanups we've done, or is that just the last accumulation?
That was the last one.
Okay,
there was a previous one, and when it goes to
there's
auction,
a subsequent one, everything's back. I'm not smiling. I can't smile. The neighbors, this has been a 9-year project.
Yeah.
And now I've got the pictures on my phone. It is almost as bad as the picture was. Both at the house and the 2 adjoining buildings are full of trash again.
Correct. We have witnessed that. We're in a position now where between now and May, it would be very difficult to go in there, abate what's there, get it assessed, and get it on the tax rolls before it goes to auction, and thereby making it difficult for us to recover any costs we were to invest in that at this time. It would be very, very tight. So we have considered going back, but it's...
So the neighbors will do, okay.
Okay, so back to the PowerPoint. All right, thank you. Okay, so these were the assessments for 2021. For cannabis cases in 2021, there were 200 new cases. 119 came from satellite imagery review, and 89 came from attending law enforcement warrants. And in 2021, there are 119 cases closed of the 200 cases. So I've mentioned in previous year annual reports that the code enforcement has had a backlog of cases. In fact, more cases opened every month than are closed. So in 2021, we tried several approaches to address the backlog. First, we performed a widespread review of open cases. We used satellite imagery, and we drove by many, many properties to attempt to verify the validity of complaints. The approach was successful in that we were able to close about 25% of the previously unreviewed cases. Another approach we took was to try to focus on a geographic area with a high density of cases. This is Fields Landing, and the parcels highlighted in orange are open code enforcement cases. So Fields Landing stood out as an area where some deliberate and simultaneous enforcement actions would make an impact. In addition, we were getting calls on a daily basis about what was going on in Fields Landing. So we decided to take a focus and address the issues there. So some of the properties, what we were dealing with was like a massive homeless encampment, an easement that was blocked with junk vehicles, and several properties that had solid waste and junk yard type conditions. So this is a picture of the easement that had just become a graveyard of broken down vehicles and solid waste, and it wasn't passable anymore. So the owner voluntarily abated this by evicting his tenant, who was causing the problems for one, and then the property was eventually cleaned up, and this is what it looks like today. The case involving the homeless encampment came to a creative conclusion. The property owner who lived out of the area had the occupants of the camp remove all of the solid waste and garbage that had accumulated in exchange for the property owner assisting the occupants in finding alternative housing. So this is the condition of it before voluntary abatement, and then today all of the garbage and solid waste are removed, as well as the homeless. And so here's kind of a before and after of Fields Landing. On the left are the cases where we had cases open early in 2021, and now the green parcels on the right indicate the cases that have been closed. And if you can see, well, maybe the laser doesn't work, but at the corner of 3rd and C Street, there's still a orange square, and that is the Bodie property that the county led an abatement on. So while the property has been cleared of solid waste, we're still processing the paperwork and getting that recorded on the lien and on the tax rolls. And so we don't close the case until we've recovered and done everything we can to recover those costs.
Supervisor Bone has a question.
So on the gateway coming in on 3rd and Main, Fields Landing, you've got it green where the mobile home is falling down, the roof is caved in and everything else, and it's still in place. Is that considered, and the fence is blocking the alley and stuff, is that considered closed then?
Well, there was nobody living in the manufactured home, and it's not accessible to anybody. So there wasn't a violation that we could keep it open for.
What do you mean accessible? I was there last weekend.
I mean, no one's living in the trailer. Are we talking about the same parcel?
The one that's falling down on the gateway, the first house you see when you pull into Fields Landing is that wetland area with the old trailer block and with the fence blocking the alley. And it went from orange to being a case, and nothing's been done with it, and now it's green. It's a closed case. So we didn't do anything. We just closed the case. It's the one I
Yeah.
see every day when I drive by it.
I don't know if we're talking about, I'm not certain I'm familiar with that particular
I got
case.
We
pictures.
will reevaluate that and take another look at
Thank
that.
you.
I know what you're talking about.
You know the one, you and I have been there, yes.
Okay.
Supervisor Bushnell has a question.
Why was it closed if nothing was done?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what case he's talking about.
Well,
And-
Director Ford does.
Yeah, I can't answer that right now. We need to go back and look at that file in particular and see what the decision-making was. There is a derelict old trailer home there, and there is some other trash on the property. I haven't been by in a while to see and to look at it. I don't know what the condition of the property is currently, and that's what we will reevaluate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we found out in trying to do a geographic focused approach was that it took a lot of staff time away from other projects. And while it, was good for the northern end of Fields Landing, it, we realized there was just too many areas of the county needing attention to essentially sideline other projects to focus on one area at a time. So we can continue to explore the new approaches to addressing the backlog. And so toward the end of 2021, with our newly allocated positions, and thank you, by the way, we found ourselves with the bandwidth to completely revamp the processes that we follow. The new process mimics the efficiency of the cannabis cases in that we start with a letter to, once we get a complaint, we send a letter to the owner notifying them that a complaint was received. And the complainant also gets a copy of that same letter so that they know that we're taking action on it. Within 2 weeks, we review the case. We look at satellite imagery. We look at permits. In a lot of cases, we drive by to see if we can see evidence of the complaint being valid. Sometimes we can't see things from the drive-by, so we'll send a consent letter, which asks for permission to come onto the property to try to either refute the complaint or verify the complaint. And what all of this does is it just systematizes our process and makes it so that we're not doing one-offs and not each individual officer isn't having to create a letter and send a letter individually. We're doing these all in bulk. And so it's really streamlined our process. And we've had pretty good success with this just in the last couple months of 2021 because that's when we implemented it. So we're going to be continuing this in 2022. And one thing I just want to point out is that should we determine that a violation exists on a property, either through driving by or a consent inspection, we notify the owner. If we are not there in person, we notify them by letter saying, you have a violation, you should call us. Our next step is to issue an NTA and maybe an NOV, but you should call us and talk to us about it because we want to work this out with you before we have to take the next step in enforcement. And we did that because we just didn't want to go straight to you have a violation and noticing people who may or may not be aware that they are in violation. We've found that a lot of people just aren't aware of that what they're doing is in violation, depending on what the issue is. So that's the steps that we take currently.
Can I ask a question, please? Yeah. The letters that we send out to the owners, are they certified?
No, they are not certified. They're not an official notice. We don't send them certified, but we do send them to all of the property owners, and we do send them so individually is what I mean, and we send them to a tenant or occupant if there is one.
So you're notifying the landowner that there's a problem, but you're not sure the landowner's getting the notification. It's a
courtesy letter. And we could send them certified, but it's kind of redundant if they are going to be getting an NTA or an NOV if it's a violation. I mean, we can certainly change that and start sending them certified. It's just an extra expense that may or may not be warranted depending on
And so you also send it to the person that's renting the home?
If there's an occupant, we'll send a copy to the occupant because sometimes the conditions are caused by the occupant. And so, yeah, we let them know what's going on as well. And the complainant gets a copy of that letter, too.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on just a moment, Karen. I see someone signing up. You don't have to sign up to speak right now. That's for later this afternoon. So, okay. Yeah, so I just didn't want to. No, I'm just signing up. Okay.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so in how I was mentioning before that we've been able to close more cases in 2021 than we've opened. So that's a reversal of previous years where we've kind of turned the tables. In previous years, we've been behind the number of cases being opened and closed. So I think the new process moving forward as we work out the details and the kinks of it and get it working the best we can, that it's going to prove to be successful. So some of the challenges that we've met in 2021 include sites with deceased property owners and no identifiable heirs. These present a challenge because there's no one stepping forward to take responsibility for the property. And for these properties, we're just starting to work with the public administrator to identify how to move forward with these. Oops. Unpermitted buildings used in unpermitted cannabis operations are another challenge. It has been our practice to require the site, in these cases, to be returned to pre-cannabis conditions and to require all the infrastructure to be removed, which includes the demolition of unpermitted buildings. However, recently this practice has received increased opposition, and because property owners often wish to retain the unpermitted buildings they've invested in. And then the other challenge we've experienced is the trend toward indoor cultivation. We have several instances where there's been a new unpermitted building erected in the same location as a previous outdoor cultivation. The difficulty with indoor cultivation is that there's, obviously the satellite imagery doesn't work, but there's very little we can do. We know we're not getting PG&E records or anything like that. And so it's easier to go, undetected by code enforcement. It creates a big, hole in what we can enforce on for that.
Rex?
And then...
You lost me on that one.
Like why it's difficult to enforce on indoor?
Yeah, go back. I mean, you went from the outdoor to the indoor, and I lost something in translation. I'm not sure what.
Well, what I was saying that our challenges were how to deal with unpermitted buildings used in cultivation. So that was indoor, and sometimes it's a drying room or something like that. And then we also are challenged by a trend we're seeing that where we have previously seen an outdoor garden or a greenhouse on a graded flat, that's gone now, and there's a new building that doesn't have permits in the same location. Yeah.
Supervisor Bone?
Well, I think that's going to be a part of this discussion. I know this has been a huge issue, and I don't know where we break into it, but I've always wondered, and we've successfully negotiated some of these under the safe home programs and stuff like. Are you ready to pounce? Or you?
No,
Okay.
I was listening because we do have the next item coming up too.
I can wait. I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to get through, but follow through.
We're coming back with the next item to ask for direction in that regard. Okay, so moving forward, some future objectives we have are using the drug ordinance to abate properties where controlled substances play a role in the public nuisance. This is an area we've yet to explore, and we would like to do that moving forward. Second, we're developing an approach to actively identify and enforce on night sky and light violations. And then we're also looking at different ways to address homeless encampments because they do present some of our challenges as well. And then lastly, we're setting up a receivership program because it would be a method to correct substandard housing cases through rehabilitation of the structure. And this would allow the county to maintain and improve the quality of our housing stock rather than losing housing. So this is a chart that shows the cases that we had opened in 2021 by supervisor district. And just to give everyone a minute to absorb what's here, we have in the cannabis cases, District 2 had, by and large, the majority of the cases, I think 138 cases. And then for traditional type cases, it looks like the 5th district had the most cases. I think there was 54. And then I also put on there the closed cases also for 2021, so you can see where the cases open closed. This is data regarding our cannabis cases. So new cases in 2021, there was 200. Those that were opened because we participated in a warrant from the sheriff's office was 89 cases. That means 119 were opened through our office. Without law enforcement participation. There were 58 no penalty compliance agreements. 6 of them did have penalties. I think that was for $187,000.
Supervisor Bone.
I was going to ask what the average fine was because we throw out these fines that are going to be $35 million if you don't do anything. And I'm just, why do we do that when we don't do that? Should we bring those back into a reasonable, or is that just to scare the panties off them?
Are you talking about the compliance agreements specifically? These compliance agreements, the only reason there were fines on these compliance agreements is that people didn't stop cultivating. And I think on 6 of the 7, or 5 of the 6 ones, they didn't stop cultivating, and on another one, they stopped and then restarted or something like that. But that was the reason why there were penalties. Can you go back to the PowerPoint, Nikki? Okay. And then there were 18 appeals requested. And so, as you know, the end of our process after we do penalties or an abatement, we come to your board for assessment, and this is the assessments that your board approved in 2021. And you can see some of them were for abatement costs and some were for penalties. And that concludes my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. And before I go to see if there's supervisor questions, I did want to say if you're listening and you wish to comment on this item, please press *9 now so that we know that you are interested in speaking. Any supervisor questions? Supervisor Bushnell?
Thank you, through the chair. I had a few, actually. So when you say we're going to start utilizing this system for the homeless camps and the night skies, how are we going to do that?
So the challenges that we're seeing with the homeless encampments is that if they're trespassing on private property, and if they're there long enough, we're still trying to understand it fully ourselves, but there are tenancy right issues that come with that. And so we need the participation of the owner to go through essentially what is an eviction process to remove the individuals, and then also work with the sheriff's office to, they already have a method to work with the property owner so that they can enter the property to check for people repopulating. So those are some of our issues, but it is going to be a partnership with us and the sheriff's office and, of course, the property owner, because it's really difficult for us to step in and remove items and if there's people still staying there. And so the challenge is getting all of those groups to work together and synchronize so that when the people are removed, the code enforcement can come in and work with the property owner to remove the solid waste and the debris left behind, or if they are unable or unwilling to do that, then we can perform a county-led abatement.
So with that statement, if you serve them an eviction notice, you're saying they have a right to be there, and also what you're saying is that it would take the participation of the person camping there to make this work?
Not necessarily the person camping there, but it goes a lot smoother if the owner is willing to participate in that eviction process, and that's the piece that we are not sure what happens if the owner is, an absentee landowner, for instance, and isn't interested in participating at all. How do we remove the people from the property? Because my understanding is that when they've been there long enough, and I don't know what period of time that equals, there are tenancy rights that they.
So my understanding is that if you file the no trespassing with the sheriff's department, you're recognizing that those tenancy rights are not there, that they're trespassing. So that I can imagine can be problematic when you're going to evict somebody that has no right to be there. So thank you for that clarification. And then the night skies?
We have some ideas. What we're trying to do are map out areas of the county where we can kind of vista point, if you will, where we would be able to look down upon large areas of property to try to see if there are night sky violations. We hear from people that there's a lot of night sky violations, and the last 2 years we've had staff go out middle of the night, morning hours, evening hours to try to pinpoint these, and we've been unsuccessful to find them. So we would, if you're seeing this and you know what road we should be going on, please let us know, because we haven't been successful, but we're trying to identify these high areas where we can go and see a large amount of property at the same time to minimize the number of hours we're driving around and not being successful.
So the availability of using satellite for light is not available?
No.
No, okay. Thank you for that. And then I'm wondering, for traditional abatement, how do you prioritize?
Good question. A lot of it is how many calls we're getting about a property. It really does come down to the impact it's having in a neighborhood. And if we are getting a lot of calls from a lot of different people about the same issue, that's really where we focus our attention. They're not always the most egregious violations, but they're clearly having an impact because we're getting calls about it. And, for lack of a better way to measure other than environmental and health and public health and safety that, are happening, it's essentially what we use.
Okay. And then my last question, and thank you for the report, is I think there was $3 million that are plus that we assessed on cannabis properties that is hanging out there, and I think the total, that was for 2021, but the total's around 10 million. What happens with that? It just sits there?
After your board approves the assessment, then we record a lien on the property, and those sit there until the property transfers.
And those are recorded against the APN?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other supervisors have any questions at this time? No, I'm not seeing any.
Maybe I
Supervisor
just
Wilson?
didn't catch about the nighttime satellite imagery. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, at this time we don't have the ability to do nighttime satellite imagery. It's something we can look into, but we don't have nighttime images.
I mean, we have a vendor for this, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Can we request something from the vendor on that?
We will look into it. There are some constraints just in terms of geo-rectifying and asking them. Right now, they fly over at a certain cadence and are able to take pictures at a certain time of day. And so that happens on a regular basis. In order to get nighttime imagery, the satellite has to be repositioned to be crossing over the area during the evening hours. So we will ask and see what the cost would be in order to get that.
I mean, they may have a partner vendor that has a different. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. I mean, we've batted this around for a while, and it seems like we should be able to get that information. And I do understand like when their service is, but seems like if they're here during the daytime, those satellites are somewhere else during the night, and vice versa. And I see them flying over, so I don't know if they're specifically taking photographs, but many are flying over. So help us out, thanks.
All right. Don't see any other questions at this time, so we'll go to the commenters who are on the phone. Again, press star 9 if you wish to talk. Our first speaker is 1291. Press star 6 to unmute, and you will have a firm 3 minutes to speak. But you don't have to speak the entire 3 minutes.
Chair Bass, that caller just dropped off.
All right. If you were that number, apparently raise your hand again. Is that what you said they dropped off? All right, so we're going to go to 9449. And press star 6 to unmute. Are you there? Nikki?
They're unmuted.
Okay, if you are 9449, you are unmuted. So it's your turn to speak.
Oh, hello. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi. Okay, great. This is Nicole Norris. Thanks so much for taking my call today. I have worked with, as you know, at least 100 victims of the abatement program, and both as a reporter. Oh, let me. My son, who's very loud. Excuse me. So I've worked with several victims of this program, and you know, I really think that we need to give it a whole another look. Basically, the whole premise of criminalizing people who couldn't get through compliance was doomed from the start. It really feels more like the county's criminalizing their constituents for their own failings, and that farmers were set up to fail in a time when they're supposed to be getting ahead with the corporate takeover of cannabis that's underway today. It seems that legalization, just a minute, honey, has been a means to criminalize cannabis farmers again, recriminalize them. And I feel I've seen this with working with abatement victims, that the narrative that there are these bad actors that don't have permits and the good actors that do is completely blown out of proportion. And it's used to justify this entire program that's really inhumane and cruel, and it's robbing our entire county of generational wealth, of their property. I mean, 70% of abatements have come from District 2. We have a very small population. 9 out of 10 people, 8 out of 10 people I speak with have dealt with code enforcement action. This has got to stop, you guys. It's actually a triple whammy for a lot of people who've lost their livelihoods, they've lost their farms, they've lost their unpermitted homes or structures, and you know, some are even suffering from ill health. Like Rhonda Olson, I just wrote an article featuring her. She hopefully just got out of the hospital for a condition related to stress. I'm hoping she can comment today too. But what you guys are doing to the county, particularly District 2 and 5, it's got to stop, you guys. It's not helping the environment. Most of the major farmers are permitted. The small legacy farmers are the ones getting abated that I've noticed. And it's got real dire impact to everybody across the board, including the government here. I mean, you can't capitalize on a brand that doesn't exist anymore. The brand is the legacy small farmers who are decimated by the abatement program, the cannabis abatement program in particular. So yeah, I'm just here today to beg you guys to reconsider not just the policy coming up, but the entire HEIR program in general.
All right,
not
thank
just
you.
for-
Thank you very much for calling in. Our next speaker is 1291, followed by 7108. So if you're 1291, press star 6 to unmute.
Well, that caller just dropped off again.
All right. For some reason, 1291, we keep having them drop off, so we'll keep trying again. We are going to go on to 7108. And if that's you, press star 6 to unmute. Welcome, Bonnie.
Good morning. Yes. first of all, I want to comment about the report. It's great that there is a report. And on page 10, it had different new cases, HEIR, warrants, total traditional, all this stuff. And it's separated by district. So I think that's very helpful to see, because I live in the district where most of the enforcement is happening. But when you get to the list of all these cases for the second district that's over 16, they just all put on these spreadsheets. It's like random. They're and I strongly suggest that they be separated by district. So each district can look at not just the general numbers, but the specific things that are happening in their district. So that's my first suggestion. And then I wanted to talk about, the night skiving. People have been complaining, and basically hardly anything's been done. And you have this satellite, and I would think, if you're going to be using a satellite, you should use it where it's really needed. And I would say this night sky thing, I've got a couple of them in my neighborhood, trying to figure out what parts was left up to the people that live in the area to be able to identify. I also want to talk about, so lack of enforcement. You've got these ordinance provisions, and then they're not being enforced. And the other one that's not being enforced is the trucking of water. That's going on and has been going on in the ordinance sets for cannabis. It's prohibited from using trucked water. So to have these ordinances that are being carried out. And in my neighborhood, we have a code enforcement issue, I guess. It was a property that got a conditional use permit, and part of it was the
I think we lost our reception. All right. Sorry about that, Bonnie. I'm not sure. All right, we are back. We had a system failure, I guess you'd say, but we are back now. So we were doing public comment on the agenda item was the code enforcement annual report, and so we will go back to those who have raised their hands online. And our first speaker is 5953, followed by 4031. So if you're 5953, press *6 to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi, my name is Lisa Gribby, and I'm a volunteer firefighter with Salmon Creek Volunteer Fire Department. And I have been the primary medical first responder for the last 26 years. I'd like to speak about the building abatement and proposed donation of
actually,
to the volunteer fire department.
Lisa, that is actually
Yes.
our next item, and we won't get to that till after 1:30. This is a different abatement item.
Okay.
This is on the report we just received on this year's activities. Okay, so yeah, definitely we'll talk to you. We'll hear from you a little bit later. So again, we are talking about the report, the annual report from code enforcement. And 4031, it's your, is that right, Nikki? Yes. 4031?
Hello?
Hello, welcome.
Hello? Hi. I think that you're going to tell me that I got to come back at 1:32. My name's Rhonda Olson, and I wanted to talk about the article that was in the paper.
Okay, yes, exactly. You get to take a lunch
Okay.
break. We'll be, we won't get there before 1:30. It's not exactly at 1:30, but it definitely will not be before then. I said, Can you call back then? To give a little process for people, at 1:30 we have a time set, which is general public comment. We will do this item, the following item, after that. At least that's what people in the audience were expecting. Okay, so how about 0150? If you're 0150, press *6 to unmute. Are you seeing anything?
They have lowered their hand.
Okay, the hand is now down. It's not showing down on here, but all right. All right, so I'm still seeing 0150 on the Zoom.
It's because I.
Okay.
But on your Zoom, you see it?
I do. But on here I have
Now that they just raised their hand. When I just looked, they didn't. So I can call on them, or you can call on them.
I can call on them. This is so much fun today. 0150, if you wish to speak on the Code Enforcement Annual Report, this is your opportunity.
Hi, this has been a major nightmare trying to get on, but I'm at least on. This is Dottie Russell. So I am absolutely beside myself. 4 abatements were done last year, and 1 was a Christian Science church. That in itself is insane. The other thing is that there's all kinds of reports about that you relocate people. The guy that was causing the trash went there without permission. When the sheriff had a letter signed from me saying that they could go onto the property, they could remove anybody that was there, this fire happened 4 days into people being in the church with blankets on the window. If they were going around every single day on their rounds, like they said, with the letter that I said that they could go in, the church never would have been burned down. But the church was burned down, and then there were people going in there. Then the county said they wanted me to board up all the windows. I did it exactly when they wanted that done. Then we called Adult Protective Services to see what could happen with this man because he had a mental illness and had been homeless for 10 years. And then the report says that you're relocating people. I don't know where that's happening, but it's not happening in Southern Humboldt. This guy just the other day went into the cabin in the back that was boarded up. So he got the boarded up piece of wood off there. It's a standing building. It's allowed to be there. And he went in there, and I went by there like I always do because nobody else does. And so I went by there to make sure nobody was there, and I noticed that there was some kind of debris in front of the church. So I went over to the sheriff's station. So as far as I know, it had been like maybe less than a day. And I went over there and I said, don't blame me. This guy is there. I don't know what's going on, but he's not allowed to be there. There's no permission to be there. I'll drive around town, tell him that he can't be there. Now, in the meantime, when I was abated, all of this stuff said nothing was happening, nobody got better, nothing got done. That's 100% not true. So you should ask Shauna for any pictures that she might have taken about when Ron was arrested and put in jail. I went and took all of his recycling. This was during COVID. You said that it's a hard thing and they really need to get participation from the landowner. As a board member, as a landlord, as a board member, I actually worked with Shauna to call DHHS, to call social services, to call Adult Protective Services. She came down. We always greeted her whenever she wanted to come. We stopped everything that we were supposed to do. And I don't know who was calling, but the bottom line is Michelle Bushnell was trying to help negotiate for the hospital to buy the property. We were in negotiations with that. We hired a $3,000 lawyer and did everything.
Thank you, Dottie. Sorry about that. 3 minutes. 3053, and it's the last hand up in the online queue. Just press *6 to unmute.
Good afternoon, Thomas Mulder here. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, Thomas.
So there's pros and cons to any governmental system. So some of the pros are, those properties that you've mentioned that the county went in and cleaned up and abated are no longer nuisances to the communities and the areas they were in. Some of the cons, I've heard some reports of, and I don't know if it's unfounded or not, but it would be nice if the board went through with the other option or alternative that structures could, if allowed through the zoning, could stay permitted.
Hey, Thomas, that's the next item. And that will happen sometime after 1:30, okay?
Oh, that's
Yep.
part of the code? I thought this was part of the code.
No, this is just the annual, this is the annual report.
Okay, my apologies. I will hold my comments till then. Actually, the last thing is the night sky thing. I hope there is something to deal with that. It is out there. I mean, people talk about it. It's out there. And hopefully there's ways the county can figure out how to do it. I would hope that they don't just target one area, but actually go around and see it, because that is not good for neighbors. In most areas, the neighbors will let their neighbor know if a tarp is blown off or something like that. But some communities, it doesn't happen. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Thomas. That's the last of the speakers we have online, so we'll go to in person. If someone wants to talk about the report we just received on the annual report of code enforcement, this would be the time. Just get up and stand by the side of the room, and if there's anyone else who's interested in talking, don't worry about raising your hand. Just stand at the side of the room, and we'll get a line going. Okay. Come forward. Welcome, Glenda. And just a reminder, it's a strict 3 minutes, so the clock's right behind me.
All right. On the annual report and that stuff, I'm wondering, of the cases, the 1,200 cases that they have open, some of them have been open for years and years and years, and they continually stay open, but they're not prosecutable. And I'm going to speak afterwards on my case in the deal, because I want to have it told, because we have some discrepancies in legal proceedings, I think, if not anything else. But how long are these cases to stay open, and how fast are they doing them? Because it seems like the ones that are way behind get way behind for years and years, and then they come every year and put something out, and then they say that they're continuing the case again, and then they wait about another year and they continue the case again. And that's what I have a problem with, is the new cases show up, but the old cases keep showing up as new cases too.
Okay. All right, thank you. And would you mind stating, I know who you are, but would you mind stating your name for the record? Sorry about that.
I'm Glenda Rozella, and I live at 2225 Walker Avenue, McKinleyville.
All right, thank you, Glenda. Is there anyone else who wanted to comment on the report that was just given? All right, I'm not seeing anyone, so. Oh, that's the line. Please come forward. Don't wait to raise your hand. Just in the line, whoever's in the line would come up. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Sarah Bean, and I guess I'm coming to be the voice of the voiceless. I think it's a great concern in our community that our assets and our community members are being used in a positive and professional way. I'm concerned that our community members are no longer being proactive, positive community members. They're too busy worrying about whether there's plastic pots in their yards. They're being persecuted and criminalized because they have a greenhouse in their yard that they may never have even grown cannabis in. or have the goals to in the future. I've now gone to many friends of mine in the pursuit of growing fruits and vegetables, and they are afraid and reluctant because of all the other persecution that's going on. And in the time in which we're in, where there's potential food shortages and gas is astronomically gone up in price, if people are afraid to grow food in their own yards, we really need to reconsider how we're directing our energies. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you for coming. And please come forward if I saw somebody getting up, but no one else wants to comment on this item. All right, well, we're back to the board. I mean, the basic motion would be to receive and file the annual report.
I was just hoping that Director Ford could maybe
Answer
address
some of those? Okay.
some of the public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the things I'd like to start by saying is that code enforcement is not a criminal process. It is a civil process. And so we're not criminalizing anybody. We're not making people villains. We're identifying where there are violations of county code. And we are asking that those be corrected. And if people are willing to correct them, as Ms. Maynell mentioned, we start with a letter which is really intended to educate. And if people come to the understanding that they're in violation and are willing to voluntarily work to fix that, there is no further action on the part of code enforcement. If people are unwilling to change and address the violations that exist, there are situations where fines and penalties can be imposed. And so I just want to make that really clear to start with. This is not a criminal, none of these are criminal proceedings. The other thing is that there was a comment made that it's small farmers who are getting abated and they're being decimated, and frankly, one of the concerns here is that we have been tasked with permitting farmers, both small farmers and larger farmers, and farmers who are not in the permit process and are cultivating and selling their product are engaging in an activity that's not allowed by ordinance. And so it is our responsibility to address that. I will also say that we have showed a lot of restraint in terms of going after smaller cultivation sites so that we are not entering into the situation articulated by the last speaker, that people who have small greenhouses and small areas, we're not even notifying that they are potentially in violation. We are basically have been leaving those alone. And I probably shouldn't say that, but that has been our approach. We have not gone after smaller cultivators. And so we absolutely want to have particularly small legacy farmers come into the legal system to be able to be permitted. There is a process available for them to come in and have a permit within 30 days. In fact, right now today, if there is somebody that's not permitted, they could have a permit by the cultivation season for this year through the county process. And I think that that is important for people to understand. There was a comment about lack of enforcement relative to night sky. We agree with that. That's why we are devoting energy and effort into that. We're placing resources on that as a priority. There's another comment made about trucking of water. This is an interesting dilemma for us because trucking of water is not an illegal activity. Using trucked water is an illegal activity for cannabis cultivation. And so we have to be there at the time that the water is being delivered in order to identify that they're using trucked water for irrigation. And so There are situations where we have been able to identify that, we have been able to have proof of that, but that is relatively difficult to obtain. There was a comment by the caller who was cut off relative to a violation on an approved cannabis site. That approved cannabis site has not initiated any activity relative to cultivation yet. We are pursuing that violation, which is an abandoned vehicle, through the code enforcement process. A letter has been sent out on that. There hasn't been follow-up. We are in the process of following up on that. I'd like to say that there was one of the callers thought that there were a lot of people being relocated. The relocation that Ms. Minnell identified was relative to a site that was an old hotel where there were occupants living there, paying rent there. And so they had the expectation that that was their home. And there are legal proceedings and those are legal requirements in those situations to, for a property owner actually, to assist with the relocation of those residents. And so what the county actually did in that case is we acted as the property owner to relocate those residents, and part of the cost that the property is being liened for is that relocation expense. And so it's really important to know that relocation is a property owner responsibility.
Director Ford, can I ask you a question right around that subject?
Yes.
With that caller, Ms. Minnell made a reference to, in the future, we are going to possibly be seeking for homeless camps, being able to relocate and clean up with property owners' help, and possibly that, but that's a future, that's going to be coming, a future process. Is that my understanding?
Well, essentially, yes.
Okay.
The homelessness is a difficult issue.
Yes. I think that possibly the caller was referencing around that comment.
Okay.
And so I just wanted to clarify that that is a process that hasn't, that we are trying to work forward and towards. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Nope, that's fine.
Can I clarify one thing?
Sure.
And I just want to clarify, I'm not sure where the question was coming from exactly, but that what we did for the Oric Motel was relocation benefits for people who, like Director Ford said, have an expectation and they're paying rent for a place, not someone who's not paying rent and is essentially trespassing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
I think that's where I'm going to stop. I just want to reemphasize that code enforcement is not a law enforcement activity, and so we're not criminalizing anybody. Our primary objective is to bring sites, property back into compliance with the Humboldt County Code, and there are fines and penalties which can be administered, but the fines and penalties are really there if people are unwilling to bring the site into compliance. If people bring a site into compliance, there's no reason for fines and penalties. If people are in compliance with the county code, they won't be talking to code enforcement. These are sites that are not in compliance with the county code, and that's just an unfortunate reality.
Thank you, Director Ford. And we're
I have an additional question. Of the 4 abatements that you referenced in your report, the pictures, those were all noticed properly and had involvement, or you as the director had involvement with the property owners to try to resolve?
Yes, on all 4 of those, there were, in some cases, very lengthy involvement with the property owner trying to get voluntary compliance.
So they were well aware of the process and what was going forward and how things would take place?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Are there any, Supervisor Wilson?
Thanks, you guys, for this. And as all of everyone up here knows, we get calls about code and enforcement and compliance on all kinds of things. And I want to also put out there, I mean, we really focused a lot today on locations where there's homeless folks. We've focused on cannabis issues, but there are also, and I know certainly in my district, where folks that are professionals and they just want to build, they just build what they build, and they're just causing all kinds of anxiety in their neighborhoods. Building fences very tall, creating character issues associated with, with that, and also just issues about putting in infrastructure that is maybe even going onto other people's property, all kinds of stuff that happens amongst what we would consider, everybody else too. I mean, not just cannabis and not just homeless things, but we're talking about that as well, and that does cause a lot of anxiety in a neighborhood, and those are code enforcement issues. And what we see too is this: when one person does that in those neighborhoods, then everyone else feels very entitled to do that as well if there's not enforcement on that, and it just becomes becomes a bit lawless in terms of that, and it can really have a lot of impacts and a lot of anxieties on neighbors in a neighborhood. And so I just wanted to recognize that's part of that long list that you guys are looking at. It's not just the areas that we sort of focused in on today. So I appreciate the work on this, and I can't remember if there was a motion or not to receive.
There hasn't been one yet. Would you like to make it?
I'll make the motion to receive the report, and thank you for working on this.
We can't, the audience does not, we don't get to do comment. You can reach out to us separately, but this is not a time where we can go back and forth.
You're welcome to send an
microphone.
email or phone calls, yeah.
Is there, right, you did public comment. There's a 3-minute public comment period each. Yes, same item. It's okay. It's, all right, do we have a second to the motion? All right. The one thing I wanted to say is, when we look on there, and I know the 4th District doesn't have a lot, but I want to just let people know, especially, on the peninsula, it means a lot to them. And it's really hard to feel like it's hard to get any focus over there because there's so much else throughout a very 4,000 square mile county. So sometimes I know that is frustrating. I know we do work on it, but just, we may not be there may not be that many, but it does affect a lot of people on the peninsula in a negative way to have to live consistently with some of the problems. But all right, so we have a motion and we have a second. And do we have the little vote tab up?
Do you see yours up, Chair Bass?
I do not see mine up yet. Should we just do you want to do a vocal one on this one?
I'll just do a roll call vote on this.
Yeah, because it's not showing up anywhere.
Supervisor Bone.
Yeah.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Bass.
Yes.
And Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
All right, so Director Ford, do we have one you want to squeeze in before we head to our lunch break? We'll be back here